Welcome to Birken Forest Monastery's live stream. Questions are welcome. I'm Ajahn Sona. Let's proceed with the first question, Pia. But before we go to the first question, two items of news. Next March the 9th, the next Sunday live stream, the time changes to daylight savings. So we're in the Pacific time zone, and it will be 1 hour earlier next Sunday. So make a note on that. If you're in a place where they don't change the times. The second item is Saturday, March the 8th. I will be giving a talk, a Dhamma talk, to the group in Portland, the Portland Friends of the Dhamma, live on Zoom. And so you can join on Zoom or live in Portland at the Portland Friends of the Dhamma Center, and that goes from 5 a.m. to 11. That's a retreat, live, in person, and hybrid. You can participate on Zoom. So you can hear the talk on Zoom, and you can stay in your nice, cozy bedroom and meditate or whatever you do. Or you can go to the center there. So that's March the 8th, Saturday, March the 8th. Well, now, let's go on to the first question then, Pia.
Ajahn, our first question is from the live stream from Hermit Mouse in Tucson, Arizona, United States. Can you talk about the difference between the absorption jhanas and experiencing profound jhana factors during other types of meditation?
Well, I'm not sure that there is a distinction. The absorption jhana, in order for the jhana factors to arrive, there has to be absorption. And this word absorption is an attempt to translate the Pali word ekagata. Ekagata, the important word in there is one, eka, meaning one, gata, meaning point, but or the peak of a mountain, but really what is being said is complete attention, exclusive attention to one item. So, so to be absorbed in something is to have completely exclusive attention on a single item. So it's hard to distinguish that the jhana factors, the emotional jhana factors in the first few jhanas are joy, joy of the mind, and ease or happiness of the body, and those are present in other aspects of life, like obviously people experience joy, don't they? And pleasure of the body. But why it arises is directed by the cause of it, which is spiritual attention which is at the service of the Eightfold Path or at the service of right view. But what's valuable in ordinary experiences of joy and ease of body, the pleasure of the body, is that then you can relate that experience to what could be achieved by this thing we call jhana or samadhi, the eighth factor of the Eightfold Path. They overlap, the conditions overlap, but they have a different reason behind them. So it's kind of like you might be thrilled at when your child wins a race or something like this. You might have joy, which is different than if you won the race and you had joy about it. So you can also be joyful in the failure of others, and you can be joyful in the success of others. So this experience of joy and also the pleasure of the body, this connected kind of experience throughout the body, occurs in for a number of reasons. It's just subsumed under this idea of right jhana or right concentration. So at least one has a sense of what it might be like to have jhana, because you've had joyful, pleasant experiences quite outside of that. But if one could just conjure up this pleasure and joy without having to step out the door, that would be nice, and without having to need worldly events to produce that. So that's the spiritual life allows you access to this under your own control without depending on worldly conditions. Yeah.
Ajahn, our next question from the live stream is from Abstract Mind. In the causal chain of events, can effects have multiple direct prior causes, or only one event arises at each single moment? In reality, all objects are simultaneously influenced by many forces, but upon looking at events unfold moment by moment, we can see that what is causing the next event is the net sum of all the forces from the prior moment, forming a single cause. Is it sensible otherwise?
Yes, it's sensible otherwise. What we have to do is, like in functioning in practical life, we have to have the necessary and sufficient cause. So when we talk about causality, we have necessary and sufficient causes to produce a certain desired result. And we don't boggle our mind or Google our mind by introducing every possible event in the universe as contributing to something like, let's go to the store. Necessary and sufficient causes are that you have access to transportation, you know where the store is, and you have money to buy the items that you intend to buy. What is happening in the Amazon rainforest at that time is not taken into consideration, nor is the particular position of Mars in its relationship to the sun. So Buddhism is a practical teaching. It uses causality only to its own ends, its own purposes and its own ends. And the Buddha is not interested in kind of useless philosophy, which does not inspire effort and direction. So that the type of causality that the Buddha talks about, this is called dependent origination. What does a certain result depend on? By the way, this, I haven't actually given much in the way of talks about this, except certain links of that dependent origination. You might not even have recognized it when I'm talking about it, but it is a major and central teaching of the Buddha, quite a profound one. Well, maybe the most profound. If you don't understand how things happen, you're wandering around at the mercy of whim and acausality. And of course, human history is full of that. We did not understand the nature of lightning and thunder. We didn't understand the nature of the northern lights or the rotation of the planet or these kind of things. And eventually you sort it out. Before that, you're wandering around in the dark. But the most critical element to sort out in terms of causality is like, why am I like I am? Why do I suffer? In fact, the critical question is is there a cause for distress, psychological distress, and is there a cause for the arising of emotional well-being? And can you maintain that? So this is one of the preoccupations of everybody through history. Some are attempting to solve it through getting more food or more clothes or a fire or something like that. That improves your well-being. Maybe others attribute it to good, a family or a good tribe or something like that. The Buddha is really deeply inquiring into this whole business of how we suffer and why we suffer, and why we have unpleasant experiences in the mental, emotional dimension. And he concludes that the entire business of existence itself is fraught with, or is latent with suffering. If you have a body at all, it's going to come under stress, even no matter what nature of the body is, because the body, this is and quite advanced in saying that all constructs have a tendency to entropy. This is a modern thing, where everything eventually falls apart. The energetic input of something eventually discharges. So birth is the beginning of an energy form. The body is very coherent, and then you can see it starts to entropy happens. It starts to unwind, and eventually death follows. And it's inescapable. There are some desperate characters attempting to live forever, download themselves into a computer or whatever. But no matter where you look, entropy in the universe follows. So it's impermanent. It's subject to dissolution. The entire universe is also subject to this. It will and is dissolving, falling apart. And so this is inescapable. So the Buddha, actually, his first conclusion is you can't find sustained well-being in conceivable universe. So his plan is how to get out of the universe, how to get out of the cycle of endless restructuring of energy. So this is, again, with modern physics, we have energy is neither created nor destroyed, but only transforms. So this is the Buddha's idea of reincarnation as well, is that mind and body keep falling apart and reforming, falling apart and reforming. It's underlying it is all kind of either psychic energy or material energy, which may be one and the same thing in the end. And it keeps flowing in a endless cycle, and fraught in that endless cycle of causality is suffering. So he has to figure out how to undo this unsatisfactory condition. When he first sits down and thinks about it, he starts with the idea of death. He says, what is the necessary and sufficient cause for death? What is it that without that, death would not arise? And can you guess? Anybody guess? Birth. Without birth, death would not occur. It's the necessary and a sufficient experience to have birth, and then death inevitably follows. And the next one, so he's going backwards through the causality thing. Usually, when you look at the description of causality in Buddhism, it goes in the forward motion. You start, say, with ignorance, and then decisions are made based on misinformation or misunderstandings, and then it shapes your consciousness, how you perceive and interact with the world, and that loops back and causes you to make other decisions and so forth, and that influences your your body and your sensory experience, the rest of your mental apparatus, your emotional apparatus as well. And this leads on to various kinds of illnesses and psychosomatic problems, and is unless the causality structure is understood, you're in a perpetual loop of inevitable unsatisfaction, dissatisfaction. And so that's the way you hear it, but actually he originates this going backwards. He says, what's the cause of death? It's birth. And now here's where it deviates from sort of the modern materialistic idea. If there is no prior being, then birth cannot occur. And this prior being is called bhava, or existence. Without prior existence, birth cannot occur. And so he conceives that a person doesn't originate out of nothing. They don't arise out of nothing. They're not born out of nothing. They're born out of something. And this is, we would say, some sort of consciousness is in prior existence to the birth. And then he goes back into what is the nature of this existence before the physical birth takes place. And that's how he works in the causality. What is the necessary and sufficient condition without which this thing could not arise? So that's how that structure of causality works. So you want to stop boggling your mind with everything in the universe is affecting everything in the universe. It's a very nice idea and is not practical. You will not get your groceries from the store if you think like that.
Next question from the live stream is from Niles in Brazil. I still resent someone from 30 years ago. How can I forgive after such a long time?
Well, you have to ask who's suffering. You're the person you cannot forgive, or you. You realize you are the person you cannot forgive. In other words, you're creating that person in your mind and then feeling hostility towards your own mind. So it's not the person. That person may not even exist now. It's this person you have created in your mind is the person you can't forgive. And it's you doing both the creation of the person and the non-forgiveness in your own little head there. So you got to think, why am I doing this? What would I gain by having resentment? And what would I be free of if I did not have that resentment? Am I somehow punishing them? No, I'm punishing myself. And by the way, I mean, if they have ill will towards you, they would be delighted to find out that you still harbored resentment towards them 30 years later. They really did a number on you, and they're delighted about that. So you got to stop delighting your enemies by torturing yourself. I mean, it's just insane when we think about it. Say, yes, people did all kinds of bad things and betrayed me in all this kind of ways. Now, there's only one way I could make them happy is to inflict punishment on myself. They won't even have to lift a finger and I punish myself. So I'm going to stop punishing myself. I'm not interested in delighting my enemies. The second thing is, what if I could, what are my favorite feelings? My favorite feelings are friendliness, goodwill, love. And whenever I encounter somebody who's really just lovely, I enjoy that presence. And I also enjoy the memory of them. I bask in the memory of them. Now, what if I decided that, well, what if I had that feeling towards everybody, including my enemies? Would I not benefit from that? Of course I would benefit from that. So I can benefit from my enemies by having goodwill towards them. I can bask in the lovely chemicals that are released when I feel friendly. Who doesn't want to do that? Why would I deprive myself of that? Just because other people don't behave in a suitable fashion, why am I going to suffer for that? I'm not going to suffer for that. They will suffer. By the way, so if people are full of hate and greed and they manipulate others and betray them and so forth, that's their problem. You don't want to make it your problem. You have goodwill and loving kindness for them. Why do they do that, by the way? Why do people are like that? Because they don't know any better. So they have the wrong map of existence. They have the wrong instruction manual for life. And those poor people are going to experience endless suffering. Here and now, they don't have to wait till they die for that. Here and now, they're missing parts of the emotional field. They have greed, hatred, and ignorance, and they proceed through life blundering through there and suffering because the ignorance, the wrong manual is misguiding them. Others are affected by their behavior, but if you analyze this, you say, I get it. I can choose to have very positive emotions, even to the most dreadful people, because it's not me that's suffering, it's them that's suffering. And I want the positive dimensions to my life. So I choose to radiate nothing but goodwill without caring about whether they behave themselves or not, whether they're terrible, murdering thieves or generous, saintly, kind people. I benefit from radiating goodwill to all of them. Now, most people can't do this, although if you work it out in your mind, you'll see how sensible that plan is. So the next level is to just not bring people that you're hostile to mind. So you you don't invite them into your house, and you don't invite them into your mind. So you don't bring people that you have problems with, you don't think about. You stop thinking about them. Now, this is a little bit strange for modern psychology. They want you to work out your ill will towards other beings and enmity to other beings through analysis, going into your life and working how you feel about this. No, Buddha says, just forget it. Just don't think about them. They're never coming into your mind again. And in modernity, people wonder, am I allowed to do that? Yes, you are. Would Freud approve? Freud was an unhappy man who really didn't work it out very well. So just ignore Freudian ideas. Ignore a lot of the psychological, analytical stuff. Just ignore it. Most psychiatrists now ignore it as well. They just give you chemicals to prevent you from thinking about it. So stop thinking about it. And by the way, that's not repression or suppression or anything like that. It's wisdom, realizing that you have a choice about who and what you think about. And you should think about certain things which don't cause you suffering and not think about things that do cause you suffering. It's not repression. It's not suppression. It's called wisdom. Yeah. Okay, let's go on to the next question.
Ajahn, the next question is from Alan in Assisi, Italy. Venerable Ajahn, I am sincerely puzzled by the controversial topic of women's discrimination in the Buddhist world. At the time of the Buddha, there were a lot of outstanding women who excelled in wisdom, practice, conduct, etc. It is a matter of fact that they have compassion, devotion, self-sacrifice, and loving kindness, often more than men themselves. What is their presumed past, parentheses bad, comma, which puts them in this hard position? Please explain.
Well, all all beings have individual situations. So some men have a very unfortunate situation in this life, and some women have a very unfortunate situation in this life. Some women have a very fortunate situation in this life, and some men have a very fortunate situation in this life. So the women who are wonderful and good and so forth are not just at the time of the Buddha, they're right present. And some wonderful men are present as well. And so it's not a general thing. You can see that there are saintly women around and there's saintly men around. The opportunities for them, some men will not have any opportunity to practice in the formal Sangha. In fact, most men will not have an opportunity. If you're very fortunate if you do. And then there's women. Some of them get opportunities to practice being taught by great teachers, access to the teachings of the Buddha, time in their life, opportunities in their life that are far exceed the opportunities that men have as well. So it's a very individualistic thing. If you're talking about the Bhikkhuni order, it's never, the Buddha didn't do this discriminating on the basis of any of these things. What he's trying to do is establish some sort of formal organization that persists through time, the longest persisting through time. And he chose that certain men who met the criteria would be the most likely to survive over the millennia or thousands of years. He notes that in the societies that he knows of, women do not have the status that men have. So it's not that he approved of it. He just says, look around. It's really discriminatory. But I'm going to try to form something that lasts. Then he was asked, well, can't women be part of it? And he said, oh, well, okay. It will be more difficult for this forum to last if I introduce women to it. He's asked then, he said, well, can't women get enlightened? Yes, they can. And he has all these disciples, these women disciples who are fully enlightened, arahants with all kinds of psychic powers and everything. He said, that's not why I make up this order. It's not because they can't do it. It's because the nature of societies as they roll through history, and this is not a 50-year plan. This is maybe a 5,000-year plan. And I want it to last as long as possible. So I'm gonna favor a certain selection of men as the most likely to survive. So there's also discrimination. If you're missing limbs, you can't enter. You can't. So there's if you're missing your eyes, or you can't be blind or deaf. You can't have illnesses that are incurable. You must be physically capable. You can't be indefinite in gender as well. There's all kinds of people that show up. He's not discriminating against this. He's just saying this selection is most likely to survive. One of the elements, of course, is that the orders are celibate as well. So one does not mix it up, making it difficult for people to remain non-sexual. So he separates the orders. Men and women have to live separately as much as possible. And this is not discrimination. It's that this is human nature. Obviously, you look around the earth, men and women like each other. They like to get together. And so if you're going to say to men, don't get together with women, then it's not kind to make it more difficult. And same with women. If you're going to say to women, don't you get together with those men, Well, don't make it hard. Don't make it hard for them to do that. Make it easier for them to do that. So they're sociological reasons. He's looking at how societies are formed and projecting into the future about what is most likely to endure. It's a system like that, not based on other things. So that's the ideas behind that.
Next question from the live stream is from Koisatar in Melbourne, Australia. Is it possible to glimpse Nibbana without ever hearing or reading the Dhamma?
No. So basically, a Buddha is a Samma Sambuddha, a fully enlightened perfection Buddha, arises without teachers at the time. And that is remarkable. That's genius level. But in previous lives, in the previous lives, the Buddha had encountered Dhamma, and it's kind of latent there. It's subconscious, and he's kind of rediscovering it. The awakening to truth is a kind of a rediscovery of it. So, in a sense, it's like would people are people able to sort of stumble across relativity or quantum physics or something without having ever been exposed to physics or the whole hundreds of years of physics development and the passing on of the information to teacher to student, etc. Very, very unlikely that somebody will reinvent relativity or E equals mc squared or even calculus, Newtonian calculus. So these are, the products of genius. But Dhamma is in the air, during the lifetime of a Buddha and what is called the sasana, the duration of the teachings of the Buddha, it floats around, and you might hear it in a snatch of a sentence, in a paragraph that is being passed around. You'll find all these Buddhist stories floating around the world, and quite often they're not associated with the Buddha. They don't say, the Buddha said. They just remember this kind of interesting saying or an interesting story. But it may have Dhamma in it, so the person would be exposed to that. It's almost like a communicable disease. The opposite of a communicable disease, you encounter it consciously or unconsciously, and it starts to bloom in your system. You may not recognize the source of, a person may not recognize the source of their awakening, but it came to them through some means of communication. Yeah.
Next question from the live stream is from Jardalal. Why are there disagreements between Theravada teachers when ultimately they are teaching the same thing? For instance, some dismiss jhana and focus more on noting and constant awareness.
Yeah, these are the Satipatthana wars and the Vipassana wars. And I mean, there's good historical reasons for it. They're not unreasonable. One of the things, the falling away of the practice of jhana, the eighth factor of the Eightfold Path, is to some degree to be blamed on some of the commentaries later in Buddhist history, particularly the Visuddhimagga of the 5th century A.D. That's 1,000 years after the Buddha. It's a very revered text, maybe 800 pages long, kind of a summary, a teacher's manual for monks. And it's developed really in Sri Lanka during a certain period of history. And there are different monasteries that are considered authoritative. So it's coming out of the Mahavihara in Sri Lanka, and they seem to be very pessimistic about the ability of anybody at that time to, including the monks, to enter the jhanas, especially in breath meditation. And so later generations presume this to be very authoritative. And so you also have the development of what's called the vipassana meditator, or dry sukha vipassana, a dry meditator, meaning, I guess, without the juiciness of samadhi. And new techniques, so noting and so forth. These are teachers' techniques introduced. They're meant to help labeling things in your mind. So, hearing, barking, like a dog is barking, and then you go back to it's distracting you, so you make notes of this. These are the techniques of teachers. And so this teacher has a particular approach to things. And the teachers are often responding to the time and place as well. The noting technique is very prominent in Mahasi Sayadaw, the Burmese, a very reputable, high man with high reputation in Burma in the 20th century. And at the time and the place of Burma, they decided that, very interestingly, they decided to teach meditation in a serious way to lay people. And they also decided that they didn't really have time for the cultivation of jhanas. They needed to get on with, accelerate the course and bypass some of this deep concentration, which is very difficult to achieve. And they wanted things to go ahead, so they focused more on the mindfulness aspect and the insight aspects, hoping to jump over the necessity for jhana. But it seemed that it kind of it became almost cultic. So it meant that when a person was getting into jhanic experiences, that the teacher would recommend that they don't dwell in that they get on with the real work, So eventually this came to some attention of monks who said, well, what about the eighth factor of the Eightfold Path? And so they are restoring that. They were saying, well, wait a sec, we think that monks can attain that. We think that maybe lay people can attain this as well. And that it might be very valuable in the movement toward in your advancement. So it's just that these things develop at certain times and places. Certain teachers have great reputations, and they emphasize certain things. And then when the student comes out of that, they say, this is Buddhism, this is the way it is. My teacher is an authority, they're great people, and they taught me this. And therefore, anything contradicting this is wrong. But the Buddha said, that you're going to have this over time. And even if 1,000 teachers of great reputation, 1,000 monks that are famous and say such and such, you need to compare it to the suttas, the discourses of the Buddha. And if they are in contradiction to that, then you should set those 1,000 famous teachers aside and take the word of the Buddha over that. So that's what happens. And that's how we keep correcting ourselves through history, going back to the discourses. Yeah. Okay.
Ajahn, the next question from the live stream is from Emperor Palpatine. You said there is no different vipassana samatha meditation in the suttas. Based on this, how do we move towards stream entry once we can already enter first jhana? Not sure where to go from here.
Well, it requires that that any form of samadhi or concentration is at the service. It's a mere servant, a handmaiden to right view. So this, what we call vipassana, it just means to see extraordinarily clearly. It's kind of like seeing how mathematics works, or understanding the theory of music. You know, there are reasons behind these things, and so when we teach children about math, we just get them to memorize like 1 and 1 is 2, 2 and 2. But eventually we try to explain why 2 and 2 is 4. So they understand the mechanism behind these things. And then they finally see very, very clearly how things work. So that vipassana is to see clearly the Four Noble Truths, why suffering arises and how you bring it to an end. So that if jhana or samadhi doesn't function as the handmaiden of that, then it's not being used well. So, but quite often our mind is too skippy and just unable to focus enough. The Buddha notices, I tell you some plain facts in front of your eyes, you're all going to die. And then when the time comes, you're just shocked out of your mind. You told me that you knew you were going to die, but now you're shocked. How come? I guess your mind couldn't grasp it. And because you couldn't maintain attention on the subject long enough to absorb the truth of it. So this is what jhana is training the mind to make it, as they say, malleable and wieldy. You can't work certain things like clay, making clay into a bowl. You first have to add water to it and work it until it's flexible. When it's not moisturized enough, it just cracks and so forth. It's not workable. So your mind, the jhana is for making your mind moldable so that it truly absorbs the truth of the vital truths of life. You're interested in the vital facts of existence, which diminish suffering. And so you have to train your mind. People go to university to learn the vital facts of physics, for instance, and very notoriously, it requires a lot of IQ points, but it also requires a lot of capacity to sustain attention. So people who can't sustain attention, they can be very bright, but they only have a 2-second attention span. And it's not long enough, so they can't make the breakthroughs because they can't sustain prolonged study on a single issue in physics. And this is the same with the Dhamma. You need to exercise the mind, strengthen the mind. You got to do the weightlifting with the mind. The jhanas are like building your muscles, your attention muscles, so that you can direct them to the puzzle. It's not an end in itself. The samadhi is not an end in itself. It issues in wisdom, and wisdom is only wisdom if it's releasing you from suffering. So that's how to think about these things. Let's go to the next question.
Next question from the live stream is from YouTube name in Michigan, United States. Dear Ajahn, would you please explain the difference between mind and objects of mind?
Well, I think most people get the difference. By the way, there's a school of philosophy called idealism, and don't be confused. I've never understood why they use the word ideal, because ideal means like perfect, but it's really ideaism. It's meaning that everything is actually just consciousness. That you're in a dream, actually. You're dreaming the world. The world, there is no external world. You're just dreaming it. As you do every night, you create a world. You sit on a couch in your dream. You take a train in your dream and all this kind of stuff. But there is no train that you're taking. It's all your mind. The train is mind-made. The world, the universe is mind-made. So this is a philosophy that occurs to people. They say, how do I know I'm not dreaming this? And but most people say, well, I don't know if you can sincerely hold that view. Most of us feel that there is an external world. By the way, there's a famous Dr. Samuel Johnson, kind of the originator of the dictionary, a very interesting character, I think 17th century, 18th century, was his biographer proposed this theory of that everything is just consciousness. This is in philosophy, in modern or Western philosophy, there's a fellow named Bishop Berkeley who is the propounder of this theory. Anyway, he presented this idea to Samuel Johnson, and Johnson thought about it for a while, and then he kicked a stone on the road, and he said, "I refute it thus." See that stone I just kicked? So, I mean, it doesn't really refute it, but it cuts to the chase. We really believe there's an external world and there's an internal world, and that we're not dreaming, that sometimes we dream and sometimes we don't dream. So object is different than mind. However, the object is taken into consciousness when you are conscious of it. So the idea of a stone arises in your mind, or an image of a stone is mentally created. And there's something called the Abhidhamma, which explains this. So the Buddha has to deal with this issue. He says there's an external object, there's a working organism called the I, and then there's I consciousness. And when these three things contact, when there's an external object, a working I, and I consciousness is available, these three things meet, and at that time, consciousness arises. So he says there's three things that need to meet in order for this consciousness to arise. So that's the Abhidhamma explanation. So he's basically a realist. He proposes there is an external world. You need an eye, an ear, a tongue, a nose, a body that all work in their specific ways, and you also need to be conscious at the same time. Because if you're asleep, you don't see. Even though your eye works and there's an object, your consciousness is not present, so you need that as well. Okay, let's go to the next question.
Next question is from Tim in Berlin, Germany. Can psychopaths develop metta?
Well, if they do, then they're not psychopaths anymore. You're either a psychopath or somebody with metta, but you're not a psychopath with metta. Can they? Yes, I suppose over long enough time that one could develop this. It might take lifetimes. Usually psychopaths don't. I mean, see, the psychopath is kind of missing a part, an emotional circuit. And if the circuit is missing, they can never develop it. It's like somebody who's absolutely blind. They don't have the eyes. They're never going to develop sight. But maybe in another lifetime, this sight will come back. Yeah.
Next question from the live stream is from Roger777. Dear Ajahn, there are many types of meditation: metta meditation, breath meditation, calming meditation, and others. Which should take priority if one wants to free oneself from samsara?
It's not just one. Usually there's a range, a menu of things that you have to do to make you a wise person. And it's just simply that a number of these things need to be developed. You need capacity for sustained attention, then you need to investigate Dhamma. So this is why we have 7 factors of enlightenment. You need mindfulness, that's the first factor. Then you need to investigate the Dhamma, which would be to investigate the fact of impermanence of all things in the universe. There are no things in the universe. There are only flows and processes. And the fact that these flows and processes are empty of substantial things, and that is a problem which is unsatisfactory. That's the investigation. Then energy. You need energy, so you need to learn some sort of structures to revive yourself when you're flagging in energy, and then the emotional attitude is joy, serenity, deep, focused capacity on single selected topics, which is concentration, and finally equanimity, to maintain balance and centeredness in the midst of the vagaries of life, of praise and blame, good fortune, bad fortune, success and failure, bad elections and good elections. Let's go to let's leave that. That's the last question, but I want to refresh yourself on this Zoom thing in Portland and this opportunity for meditation in Portland, and perhaps Metta could fill us in about that. It should be in the notes on the side, and the what do you call that? The comment. Look down in the comment section, and we will have the details of that next Saturday from 5 a.m. to 11 a.m. And the Zoom opportunity will be at 9 a.m. Yes. And I think, are you going to say something, Metta? Or
I can say something.
Okay.
Sure, I'll put something on the screen also. Hold on one second here. Okay, yeah, that seems to be working. So let me switch to my screen. And yes, as Ajahn said, next week, on Saturday, he will be joining Portland Friends of the Dhamma for a Zoom. We'll be broadcasting here from the studio, and he will be beamed in to their location, which is in Portland, Oregon. So if you're local to Portland and would like to go visit, please do. Their website is pdxdhamma.org, and on their website, they've got the event here. And if we click on that, hopefully it will come up, of the half-day drop-in retreat. And as it's written, it makes sense for folks who would like to join live in person. They're having a half-day retreat, and people are welcome, but it's certainly not required to come at 5 a.m. It'll be available for people locally. The Zoom event will start streaming at 7:30 a.m., and they have the Zoom link on their page, and we can pop that into the chat, and we'll leave that open after the live stream. So they should have the Zoom link, right here on this page. So for folks coming on Zoom, Ajahn Sona will join at 9 a.m., and there's a online on Zoom meditation at 8 a.m. for folks who would like to join. I believe they have the large meeting, so the Zoom room will be available to 500 people. So there'll be a group there and a group joining on Zoom, so feel free wherever you are. And this is all in Pacific Standard Time in the West Coast of Canada and the United States. So I think that's everything. And like I said, find that on the Portland Friends of the Dhamma website, which is pdxdhamma.org. Thank you very much. Wait.
I'd also like to mention, so this is the closing here, I have 3 books. Well, I have more than that, but 3 books that are, now 2 of them are currently available on Amazon. So this is one of them, What Comes Before Mindfulness, Effective Effort for Gardening Your Inner Life. And this one is called Bloom, and it's a really good book, but it's not available on Amazon anymore. It was on Amazon, but we took we had a publisher for this, and we decided that we want to, do our own publications on Amazon. So eventually it will find its way back to Amazon. And in the meantime, it's not on there. And third book, I don't have it with me, but it's called Life is a Near-Death Experience. And it's about the 5 subjects for frequent recollection. And it's available on Amazon as well. So every now and then I want to refresh people's mind that there is whole books by me on Amazon. And we'll try to get Bloom back up there. We may change the title to make it a little more specific. What's the whole title there? Buddhist Reflections on Serenity and Love. So that's nice to reflect on. And we will reissue this when we get around to it. It's all written. It's been up there for several years, but we're just taking it back into our specific control of publication. Yeah.
And Ajahn, I've put that on the screen here. So people can go to our website, which is birken.ca, and go to resources and find the publications there. And then you're linked to where it will be on the internet. And with Bloom too, Bloom is actually available as an audiobook on your YouTube channel.
Yes. Right. So it's in the form of an audiobook on my YouTube channel. It's narrated by Bodhipala. Very nicely done. She's has a nice voice, and it's not a man's voice. So, yes. So, that is all for this week. Birken Forest Monastery's live stream with Ajahn Sona. See you next week.